Hello, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Welcome to... I can't take credit for that.
Oh, boo. Hate it then.
Yeah, I know, but it's my favourite intro to anything ever. You are listening to Radio Gorepress. I'm really sorry if you were under the impression it was a better podcast and you fat-fingered the link and ended up here, but please stay. Sometimes we're educational and fun.
Sometimes.
So occasionally.
You'll have to sit tight to wait and see if this is one of those occasions.
This might be a bad one. Who knows? I'm Sarah. Joining me, as always, is my lovely co-host, Phil.
Hello.
We are a couple of dummy thick idiots who talk about horror movies. Actually, no. I'm an idiot. You're all right.
I mean, we're both pretty idiotic, to be fair.
Yeah, I can, to quote a great man, I can feel parts of my brain falling away like wet cake.
Love it.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm sleepy, as always. Been doing crazy hours with work recently just to get stuff done. Had some animations that needed to be done for an event that was going on this week that I found out about like sometime last week. So it was a manic kind of rush to get them all done in time. But done they were after some very late nights. So just in the middle of recovering from that.
I feel, yeah. I think tired is sort of just the general mood at the moment. I think we're all feeling a little bit overworked and a bit overwhelmed. But also, England seems to have gone from 0 to summer in about 10 seconds flat.
I know, it's exhausting.
It's so warm. I'm not built for this. I'm so pasty. I'm not okay.
I know.
It's not okay.
And there was just no acclimatization either. It was just, like you say, it was just cold, wet, hail, cold, wet, blazing hot.
Yeah.
That was
Here
it.
Here you go. Deal with it.
This is summer now.
This rapid descent into Hades. Enjoy. Ugh. I'll find a way to complain about anything, though. I really am happy because we all need a little bit of vitamin D. And
yes, this is true.
Lord knows that's been in short supply this year so far. So, yeah, I'm gonna quit my whinging. And if it rains tomorrow, not my fault.
Sarah is now declaring this podcast a whinge-free zone.
No, I didn't say that.
You did. That is effectively what you were saying.
I might have to go back on that at some point.
We'll see how long it lasts.
So, this was kind of my suggestion, but it was sort of based on your suggestion. I feel like we've talked about The Conjuring in passing quite a lot, but we've never dedicated any real chunk of time to discussing any of the Conjuring movies. Am I correct in saying this? You're quite a fan of the Conjuring universe?
I am, yeah. I mean, we'll get onto it a bit later, but I really respect James Wan's kind of directorial style and what he brings to the horror kind of genre. Okay. It's sort of my sort of thing.
I think this might be one of those rare shows where we are not in agreement on everything.
Interesting. That is interesting.
Yeah. Yes. But before that, do you want to give us a synopsis of the film? Like, I'm pretty sure everybody listening will be very familiar with The Conjuring or the Conjuring universe by this point. But for the uninitiated, do you want to give us a little bit of a rundown?
Why not? In 1970, paranormal investigators and demonologists Lorraine and Ed Warren are summoned to the home of Carolyn and Roger Perron. The Perrons and their 5 daughters have recently moved into a secluded farmhouse where a supernatural presence has made itself known. Though the manifestations are relatively benign at first, events soon escalate in horrifying fashion, especially after the Warrens discover the house's macabre history. Ooh.
Accurate, yeah.
Yeah. Like, good job, Google.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that demonologist is the coolest sounding profession that I've ever heard. Maybe not in actuality, but the title alone, metal as fuck. Mm-hmm. So, mad respect for that. How does one become a demonologist?
You'll have to ask the Warrens.
I can't. One of them's... No, they're both deceased, I think, are they?
Okay, I didn't actually know that.
I know he is. Ooh, hopefully I haven't, prematurely headcanoned her away. I know Ed Warren passed away in about 2006, because I'm going to talk about the real Warrens a little bit later.
They are both dead, yes. Ed Warren was 2006, Lorraine was 2019.
So I think, right, before I get too far ahead of myself, and especially after the St. Maud show, I think it's probably worth noting before we delve into this much more, I consider myself a skeptic. Mm-hmm. Where do you land?
It's an interesting one, because I've always been skeptic, but I've always, the older I've got, the more willing I am to entertain the fact that there is kind of something that the more I know that there are things that we are unable to see at the moment with the current level of technology we have. Not that I'm necessarily saying that anything has happened. There have been some spooky occurrences that have happened to me that I am probably more willing to attribute to a real, sort of sensible occurrence than anything paranormal.
Yeah, spooky things wouldn't be your first.
Yeah, well, the weirdest one was, funnily enough, interesting to say, we just watched The Conjuring.
Well, good. I'm glad you did your preparation.
Yeah, it happened last night. No, it was a couple of years ago. My ex and I, we just watched The Conjuring with my housemates at the time, and we did the usual thing where we prank each other. Kind of, someone would set the clock to read 3:07, and it was fun.
Oh, hijinks!
We were just settling down for the night, and I was kind of cuddling up to her and kind of dozing off, and thinking she was on her phone, and both of us heard from the foot of the bed a noise, and can't remember what the noise actually sounded like, but it didn't sound like it was something falling over. It sounded like it was a kind of vocalization almost.
Okay.
And bearing in mind the way the room was actually arranged, there was the bedroom door in the front and to the left, and the window behind us. We just hadn't, and it was a box room as well. It was tiny. There was no room to swing a cat, and we just couldn't work out what had actually happened. Really freaked us out. We had to turn the lights on and watch The Office for a bit to calm down.
The Office, the most wholesome thing you could think of.
But it was just it was funny you should ask kind of whether I'm a believer or not, because that's my go-to story about unexplained events, and it happened to be just after having watched this very film.
Interesting. So did you immediately rush out and invest in some holy water and call a young priest and an old priest?
No, that was not on the top of my list. I did take a look around. I took a look around to see if there was anything that would have, been likely to have made the noise, but everyone was up in bed. It was quite an old house, so couldn't hear any. You would have heard kind of footsteps moving around. So, because I know I've literally just said that we've been pranking each other, but yeah.
See, I don't know, man. I am far more scared of real world terrors than I am of anything spook adjacent. Mm-hmm. So if I'm lying in bed and I hear a noise, it's oh God, somebody's trying to break in. I better grab the baseball bat that sits by the side of my bed at all times. Some might say I'm paranoid. Others would call it prepared. But yeah, my brain wouldn't go to, oh, maybe it's a ghost. I don't know. Maybe I think I'm a very pragmatic person, and I've never considered myself to be very spiritual.
Yeah.
So it's never kind of my first explanation for anything.
For sure. Like I said, we did try and rationalize it. We didn't immediately jump to something spooky, but it was just hard to work out. It's hard to think about what it could have been.
Also, what I will say, living with cats, the answer is 99% of the time cats.
I did not
Cats
live with
did
a
it.
cat, though.
Maybe you lived with a ghost cat and just didn't know.
Well, then it's supernatural, so...
What? Look, I don't make the rules. I'm just here to speculate, okay? Science, baby. Show me tangible proof and I'll believe it. Anyway, so we mentioned James Wan.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go right in and talk about Mr. Wan. I watched a little interview with him. It was only about 5 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
I always forget he's Australian.
I didn't hear that. Not sure I even knew he was Australian.
Well, I think I kind of made that connection because he's collaborated with Lee Whannell so much.
Okay,
and I know
yeah.
he's Australian, so I think I sort of made the assumption. And actually, I think this was the first film he'd made that wasn't a collaboration with Lee Whannell, whether that be writing or directing or whatever. So, I mean, talk about him a little bit, because you said you really like what he brings to the horror genre.
Yeah.
So let's talk about him in general before we talk specifics.
That sounds good. I think he is willing to be a bit more, not necessarily subtle, because he isn't the most subtle of directors, but it's quite old school. His approach is a bit more old school. It's a lot of
100%.
It's a lot of things going bump in the night and spooky houses, and I like that's just what I enjoy. I really enjoy kind of paranormal horror, and like that's he just kind of seems to embrace that aesthetic that was, and in fact his I was reading his kind of way of shooting this film, in fact, was to try and ape a lot of sort of horrors from the 70s.
I can definitely see the influence. Kind of more than anything in like the framing of certain shots, and like obviously near the beginning of the film you've got that. I don't think it's a tracking shot. I think it's designed to look like a one shot. When it kind of goes from you start at the beginning and you kind of pass all the family members and end up in the garden. I think it's been sort of cleverly stitched together, but it's like gives the illusion of a tracking shot.
I wanted to check that because I wrote that down, whether it was a Steadicam shot or not, because I mean either way I love those sort of shots because they lend a real like chaotic nature to because you often find those sort of shots associated with characters kind of handing off to each other, taking over. Like a character will walk out of shot just as another one comes in, and like the one that jumps out is the opening of Serenity. They do that really well, and it's a perfect way to explore the space that the characters are in. Because what was it we were watching the other day? There was a horror, and I was trying to work out if I felt the location they were in was a character in its own right. You know how kind of you find some films the location is just as much of a character, and I didn't think it did, and that was because there weren't any. It's on the tip of my tongue. I can't remember what it was, but there weren't really many kind of like establishing shots of. I think it was actually St. Maud, the actual house that Amanda lived in. Like there weren't really many kind of shots through the house. It was very much like locked off in rooms, and you didn't really get a sense of the space they were in. But with this one, there's a lot of kind of cameras moving through one room to another, and that Steadicam shot really highlights the space they're in. And I really like that.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there as well, because I think you would definitely be correct in sort of saying that the farmhouse is as much of a character as any of the family members or the Warrens. Because, I mean, not just for the fact that it's where the bulk of the action takes place. And obviously, so to go into specifics, they do discuss that, you know, demonic possession isn't necessarily linked to a building. They can like latch onto people and it can kind of follow people even if they move. But the backstory is very much centered around this property. I think I read into it a little bit because I hadn't realized it was a true story. I guess I should have made that assumption because I knew The Conjuring 2 was based on the Enfield poltergeist. And that's a story I was pretty familiar with.
And they in fact, not name check, but they mention a house up in Long Island, I think, which...
Well, isn't it The Conjuring 2 that actually... Don't they start with the DeFeo murders?
I think so. But either way, they kind of nod to... Certainly in the first one, they nod to the Amityville haunting, which is obviously another kind of like based on real events film. I mean...
Based on,
inverted commas. Air quotation marks all over the place.
But yeah, so I did a little bit of research on the real life case, and from what I can gather, it does seem to have been represented fairly what's the word I'm looking for? Accurately, I guess. And I don't know. Right. I don't want to get too critical straight off the bat, but I'm gonna, because we're there already. Was this really the most interesting story they could have told?
Interesting.
Because, I mean, the backstory is far more interesting than what actually happens to the Perrin family. To me, at least. How do you feel about that? Do you think, like, because, I mean, I think you're right in calling James Wan's style subtle. I think subtle is the right word. And I think that's sort of evident throughout his career. I think the first Saw movie is great. I think the second one's quite enjoyable. But any subtlety that was present in the first one rapidly just gets tossed out of the window as that franchise wears on.
Isn't it? Because you it's like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That you become convinced that these sort of films are a lot more bloody than they actually are, but it's all about...
Oh, and there's almost nothing.
All about kind of inference and the feeling associated with it rather than actually physically things on screen.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why I would call the first Saw movie more of a thriller than a horror movie, if I'm being honest. But yeah, you can see his fingerprints sort of throughout. And yes, there is a definite... subtlety, yes. I wouldn't call him restrained. No, yeah,
because I wanted to say subtle, but then there are... He does... It's right. There's not necessarily restraint there. He's good at keeping things... He's good at ramping up tension over a period of time and keeping things steadily building rather than going all out. But at the same time, when things do go all out, it's all the bells and whistles, you know?
Okay.
Oh, no.
No, it's fine. We'll keep going.
No. Don't do this, Sarah.
No, I'm going to do it. You can't see. You are not the boss of me, Philip. I'll do what I want. So, going back to the fact that I'm a skeptic, when we are, well, we're introduced to the Warrens before we're introduced to the Perrin family, obviously. And they kind of give you a little backstory. You see them in a teaching environment. You see their kind of, what do they even call it? The museum that they effectively have in their home. Is it Connecticut or Massachusetts? It's somewhere like Connecticut or Massachusetts or somewhere like that.
It was one of those. New England somewhere.
But that was a real thing as well. So you kind of get a feel of who these people are. And then they introduce Lorraine as like a gifted clairvoyant. And like my stupid, cynical brain is just like, oh, a liar then. And that's my problem. But stuff like that pulls me straight out of things.
It's interesting though, because they are anchoring it very much in the real world. It's like, these people are real. This is what they did. Then there is an acknowledgement that, or at least a... what's the word? Kind of a endorsement that what they were doing was real and
or valid or absolutely. And I think kind of the success of this film and how much you enjoy it kind of hinges on how much of yourself you're willing to give over to the idea that these things might be real.
Yeah.
So because I am of the opinion that, I don't necessarily believe in ghosts and demons. If a demon would like to possess me at any time and spectacularly prove me wrong, I'd be open to that.
I thought you were going to ask them to email in. If a demon is out there who wants to email in to let us know that they're real.
If a demon emails in, then straight off the bat, I don't believe you. You're a human. I'm no fool. I don't know. I wish I believed in that sort of stuff. I really do. I think life would be a lot more fun.
I mean, do you think had they not said this is a story about the Warrens, you would have enjoyed it better? Because
probably, actually,
because, to me, this wasn't a. I really distanced it from the real life events of what happened. This was always, to me, it was just a ghost story, and I separated the events that happened in real life from the film, and I can see why, if you tied those two together, you would enjoy it less, because you'd just be doubtful of everything that happened, because you know that you're reluctant, you don't believe in that sort of thing, therefore you don't believe in what the Warrens do, therefore the events of the film couldn't have happened,
Yeah, and therefore don't affect you. It almost becomes impossible to suspend disbelief at that point. And again, I realise this is my issue and it's not the fault of the film or the filmmakers in any way. But it is definitely a reason why I don't think more highly of this film. And ditto the sequel as well, because so there was a mini-series about the Enfield poltergeist that came out, I think just before the film.
Has that got Timothy Spall in? Am I making it up?
It has got Timothy Spall in it. And it was quite good. And I think I probably preferred that to The Conjuring 2. However, at that point, I'd already read enough to know that the Enfield poltergeist story had been completely debunked. And they were totally defrauding people. And so even if you cast doubt on one of the stories that they use, it sort of casts doubt on everything.
Yeah,
then.
because the whole premise relies on their customers being entirely invested in it, right? And if one event is proven to be false, then everything else could be. There's no reason why they would fake one thing but not another's. So I can perfectly understand that.
Who was your favourite character? Sorry, that's completely out of left field.
I was, wasn't it? I was like, okay. Character, I really like the presentation of the Warrens in this film.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay. I think
again, setting aside the fact that they're manipulative people in real life, or at least were. They took people for a ride. If that's in fact what you believe, of course, but. I don't know. It's just quite wholesome,
So I read an interview with Vera Farmiga recently, actually, because obviously The Conjuring 3's just come out in the UK, I believe. And it was kind of her talking about the reason she feels like these films work, or that people get so invested in them, is because she sort of views it as a love story. Which kind of goes some way to backing up what you were just saying, but also... So knowing what I know about the Warrens in real life, or, well, what I've read, I should say it's all alleged.
Yeah.
Because we don't know. I don't like to speak ill of the dead. I don't think there's been any sort of legal confirmation that any of the shady things they may have done.
I've been trying to dance around that exact topic as well, but yeah.
I did some Googling. I could only find a couple of articles, but there was some suggestion that They may not have been as staunch in their faith as they pretended to be. That Ed Warren entered into a relationship with a 15-year-old girl when he was about 30 plus, and that Lorraine Warren knew about it, and the girl lived with them, and that was the whole thing. However, again, alleged. We don't know. So I'm not going to sit here and cast aspersions on the character because I just don't know. But what bothers me is their characterization in the films as being like, I'm sorry, you can hear my cat. Or maybe it's a spook
cat. Ooh.
Maybe it's some sort of spectre in my spare room, and not my cat pretending that he hasn't been fed 15 minutes ago. But yeah, I think it's just this kind of overly glossy Hollywood sham of a marriage that they're kind of pretending. Like, nobody's that perfect. I would love those characters more if they showed them as being flawed humans. Or, just fucking human. Yeah. Nobody's all good and all bad. And I'm sure the real life Warrens, even if the things that they have been accused of posthumously, whatever, even if there's any truth to that, it doesn't take away from the fact that they probably did help a lot of people while they were alive. Or at least gave them some sort of comfort.
Right.
Or validation of their fears, Nobody exists in a vacuum. Everything is shades of grey. But yeah, I think I just would have been a little bit more on board if they'd been portrayed as being fallible.
Yeah, I was reading a Reddit thread the other day, and they were referred to as almost like Christian superheroes. And I can say, basically. I can see that. It's interesting you should say that, though, because I and this is probably blasphemy to say, but
oh no,
I would have, despite the fact that one's considerably scarier than the other. I mean, The Conjuring was rated R, not for bad language, not for
I know,
not for like nudity. It's entirely superficially safe. It was rated R purely for just how scary it is, which is interesting.
Yeah, because they were aiming for a much lower rating, and I think even the filmmakers were surprised when they were like, "No, it's a hard R."
Yeah.
And they didn't appeal it. They were like, "Cool, we made a scary thing."
So yeah, one's considerably more scary than the other, but I would have not. I would happily watch this as a double bill with Poltergeist. In the sense that,
do you know what? Yeah, I can see exactly why you're saying that. They are very similar, sort of. Right,
it's hokey, but it's like the power of the family rallying around and defeating this evil that haunts them. Like, I know Poltergeist is very much. I mean, I guess The Conjuring is a modern classic as well, but yeah, they just strike me as very tonally similar.
I agree. I do agree. After starting this show saying that I didn't think we would agree as much as normal, I do agree on that point. I will concede. But to kind of take it back to the last mini-sode that we did, where we announced this show, I described this as wholesome horror. And one of our patrons, Sam, did pull me up on that in the Discord. Because I might be broken in thinking that this is wholesome. I completely appreciate that. Yes, my gauge is probably askew. But I would definitely describe Poltergeist as a similarly sort of wholesome horror. It's just, and I don't mean this as an insult, but they're a bit studio-y and therefore a bit safe. And that's not to say they aren't both very good films.
Yeah.
Because me saying that makes it sound like a bad thing, and that's not what I'm saying at all. But that, to me, is how I would describe them. I agree. They're very similar tonally, and I think they would make a really good double bill.
Yeah, I mean, it's the happily ever after at the end of it, right? Like, absolutely nothing. Like, they're scary throughout, but the family comes out unscathed and able to move on with their life with no lasting kind of damage.
I think this is why I class stuff like this as like wholesome, in inverted quotes, horror. Because we're so used to, whether we're invested in the characters or not, we're so used to getting to the end of a film and at least some of them will be dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not the case in these sorts of films, which is interesting. I find that really interesting, that people, like, the stakes are still high enough that people find them really, really scary, despite, you know, probably knowing that nobody's going to come to a grisly end, which is really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I was just that's what I had in mind when I was watching it, you know. I think interestingly, because I was reading online, just to bring another film into it, I was reading about the end of It Chapter 2, and I find it a little weird that the thing about the end of It Chapter 2, they were very, and spoiler alert, they were very overt and obvious in the way it was really ham-fisted the way they ended it with, like...
Oh yeah, and there were about 3 different endings. It just kept going on and on.
Well, it was specifically when the kids when the kids were just rallying around Pennywise and just insulting him, and that was how they defeated him.
Bullying him to death. Yeah.
Which, like, it seems ham-fisted, but I would argue that it's no different tonally to something like The Conjuring or Poltergeist, because all that happens is just a group of humans rallying around each other and their unity and love for each other overpowering the evil. You know,
you sicken me.
What? That's exactly what happens, right? And I think it's weird. It's weird that everyone turns on the end of It Chapter 2 when it's effectively the same thing, right?
I see what you're saying. I think... So I still have issues with It Chapter 2. I've only seen it once. I'm going to go back and I'll watch it again because I want to give it a second chance.
It is
now I know what to expect.
Whole other conversation, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. So, spoiler alert, doesthedogdie.com. Yes, the dog does die.
Very quickly.
I hate that. After saying the stakes aren't as high because none of the characters die, my favourite character died, and he was only on screen for about a minute.
And you have answered the question I was going to ask as well. Your favourite character was Sadie.
Of course.
Should have guessed
Did you
that,
really need to ask that? Dogs
Bless her.
beat humans any day of the week. Give me dogs. Doggos.
You first?
I find, just to go back to that for a second, I'm sort of sick of seeing it. I realise I referenced doesthedogdie.com because it is such a prevalent thing in films, not just horror films, in films in general, that, you know, there is a whole website for people who are sensitive to that sort of thing to double check and see if it's safe to watch. Have we not seen it enough?
It's interesting, isn't it? I think, and it's not to belittle anyone's feelings about animals, but I think there is a tendency that maybe pets are less worthy than the actual characters. And
bullshit.
Exactly. That's why I prefaced it the way I did. But that is probably why they have these moments, because it's a way of showing there is something bad going on without actually threatening the characters that the story's exploring, you know?
I get it. However, my cats are my family members.
Yeah, no, of course, like I said, I'm not disputing that. And anyone with a pet, really, like, everyone...
You come near my cats, I will windmill indiscriminately. I'm a pacifist until you go near my cats. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
I don't know. I find it really odd because I and many other people I know are far more affected by like animal deaths than human deaths on screen. Not in real life, obviously.
Yeah.
But on screen. So I find that to be a curious choice.
I guess it comes down to the difficulty in which it is to tell a story involving a pet, like unless you're having like a man and his dog story, or like something like, you know,
I disagree.
Homeward Bound or something.
I disagree, especially in this kind of a film. because it's sort of, pretty widely known that cats and dogs stare at things that aren't there. And, they're supposed to be like a conduit to the spirit world and they can see things we can't. That would have been perfect.
Well, he did, right?
Look,
well, she did, sorry. Like, she refused to go into the house.
Yeah, for about 30 seconds and then they murdered her. I'm livid. I'm going to write James Wan a strongly worded letter about this. All I'm saying before we move on is if it had been one of the kids, I'd have been far less upset.
I am not saying a word.
Moving on. I find, back to the Warrens briefly. So we've talked about their representation as like terrifically pious, people with a very well-rounded moral compass, shall we say. But I think they kind of go a little bit too far with it in places. And there's at one point where they're just like, oh, we should help them. Like, the family are really nice. We should help them. Oh, what? If they hadn't been nice, you'd have just been like, enjoy your demonic possession, losers, and noped out of there. I don't know. I found that really weird.
Yeah.
Do people have to be nice for you to want to help them?
I mean, I would imagine not. Well, in reality, yes. But if these characters are as, like you say, as pious as you say, as they are portrayed at least, then theoretically, no. I guess they needed a justification to get the Warrens in, despite the fact that there is there are reasons for them not to come along. I mean, obviously the fact that they're not, that the parents aren't Christians,
Look, I'm just saying, I wonder if this film could have gone in a very different direction if it had been some low-income heathen family and they'd just been like, no, thank you, and gone to help some other God-fearing people. I don't know. I'm just saying. I found that in an otherwise strong script, I found that to be a weird kind of just like Daredevil levels of a moral code. Just get over yourselves. I get that you want to help people, but how about you just help all people?
Yeah.
Regardless. Not just go, but they're nice.
But then presumably it is based on a real story, so I would imagine the real life parents aren't kind of particularly God-fearing, and the same kind of issues were still... I don't know.
So, when I was reading about the real story, the family lived at that farmhouse for 10 years. What?
It's feral time, isn't it?
Were they enduring, like, demonic shit the entire decade? I want to know more about this. I just read somewhere that it was like, the parent family lived in the farmhouse for 10 years. Wait, what? Expand. Expand on that. Was it just like every morning you wake up with a new bruise and go, oh, it's Bathsheba again? What the fuck? I need answers, Phil.
Yeah, I mean, funnily you should mention that. I was going to say earlier, I think that's perhaps why the Enfield haunting was so egregious with its portrayal of like the spirit world, as it were, because there is actual evidence that you can look at and you see the supposed photos of the girls levitating, and it's clearly them.
Oh yeah, she's just jumping on the
beds. Yeah, like yeah. Everyone knows what someone looks like when they're jumping off of a bed. I can see why that's particularly egregious with the way it portrays that whole thing and how you would be particularly averse to it and the way it I can't remember. I'm trying to like frantically scramble for words as I'm going along. I'm
just waiting for you to like pull us back onto some sort of train of thought. That was quite fun. I was just Michael, I'll interject any second now.
Starts speaking and doesn't really know where he's going to go and just hopes he gets there in time.
Bathsheba's a cool name, isn't it?
Is that one of your notes?
It is. So that was all, well, the people existed. I was going to say that was all factually accurate as well. There was a person called Bathsheba. This house was built in, I think, like 1735. all of the background and what happened and this link to the Salem witch trials, all true. Which is kind of mind-blowing. That's the most interesting part of the film to me.
Okay.
Is that background.
So
I wish we'd seen more of that.
I was about to say, is that what you wish they would have explored?
Yeah, I would have loved that.
Okay.
But then it probably wouldn't have been a James Wan film because that would have breached the subtlety.
That would have been like a Robert Eggers movie.
Yeah. Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
He's
Robert Eggers.
halfway there anyway with The Witch, right?
The Perrin family origin story. Stark, black and white, minimal dialogue. Give it to me, please. Come on, Eggers. I know he listens. He doesn't.
Can you imagine?
Let's tweet him. Hello, Mr. Robert. So, right. We know the horror landscape is changing.
Yep.
We know that horror films make a shit ton of money. We know that previously they were kind of a seasonal thing and now they're peppered throughout the year because, studios have realised, there are audiences for this shit. They don't just want to be scared at Halloween. So this film cost $20 million to make.
Okay.
Which is actually not that bad for a film that looks as good as it does.
Certainly the house itself was reconstructed as a replica
they built
of
the tree.
Yeah, and the tree, yeah.
That's insane. Yeah. That tree was a prop. That's incredible to me.
I can see why they'd have that big of a budget if they're constructing an entire house for a
film. So as far as horror films go, I guess that is a big budget, but that's not in the wider scope of films, it's not really a big budget anymore. But it made 137 million, I think, at the box office just in America alone.
Oh, wow.
And I think probably you can kind of trace the tides starting to turn perhaps back to like 2013 when films like this came out and studio heads were like, oh, dollar signs. So I think whilst The Conjuring is definitely not one of my favourite modern horrors, I think its legacy is more important than the film itself in terms of what it's done for the genre.
Yeah, there's a few of them around there. It's certainly Insidious as well, Sinister. There are a few around that kind of like 2010, around then that...
Do you know what? In terms of James Wan kind of paranormal investigator films, I'm going to go out on a limb and say I prefer Insidious.
Okay. Interesting.
Just a personal preference.
Yeah, I'm interesting. Yeah, I couldn't, to be honest, I couldn't get over Darth Maul.
See, I found that quite creepy.
Okay.
I see where you're coming from. Like, don't.
Oh, you must have heard that.
No, I know, but now I'm reevaluating it in my head because that, like, the face I always found really scary, and now I'm just like, oh no.
Don't get me wrong, there are
Ray Park now.
Yeah. There are, like, it's again a fantastic movie. It's really enjoyable and it deserves to be known the way it does. Was
that Patrick Wilson as well?
Yeah,
it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, because they
like working together, don't they?
That's the one with the... I can't remember what they call it. There's like The Other Side or something. It's like a afterlife-y version of the real world. And there's some really like spooky scenes that didn't require anything other than just a bunch of actors in a room. Like they, again, it's
and like that song that kept playing was super creepy.
Tiptoe Through the Tulips. But
I don't like that.
Point to kind of James Wan's preference to shoot things in the manner that they would have done 30, 40, 50 years ago. Like I said, those ghosts could have been CGI. They could have been any number of things could have been done to make those ghosts creepier in Insidious. But they were just a bunch of people in grey makeup, job done. And that's all it needs to be, And
it could have gone the way of 13 Ghosts. which I'm not saying is bad, but it's a guilty pleasure. Let's face it.
Yeah. I think they put a lot of effort into 13 Ghosts. It's one of those films that
they did.
It's easy to write off, but then you look into the attention that was invested in it, you know, and it's...
I'm not going to dispute that at all. Like, fair play to you, but it's not scary. It's not a scary film, and they are not scary ghosts.
No.
Whereas, like you say, if you just sort of just rein it in a little bit, far creepier. Every single time. So, question. This is completely... Well, it's somewhat related.
Who's your favourite character?
We did that already. Would you rather live in a haunted house or in the Team 10 house?
In the what house?
Or any... Wasn't that like Jake Paul's influencer house?
Oh, God, I have
or
never
any,
heard of that.
Like,
and
or any content house.
I hate those words. I hate the words that are coming out of your mouth. Haunted house.
Especially in that series.
Haunted house. Those other things I haven't heard of, and I don't want to hear about them.
Basically, would you want to live with ghosts or Jake Paul?
Ghosts.
Yes, same.
100%.
Well, I don't know
without
why.
doubt.
I don't know why, but I was watching it. I was just like, could always be worse.
Could be Jake Paul.
Yeah.
Don't. He's going to be cast in a ghost story now.
Oh, no.
You've done it.
Well, I'm not watching it. I will not be watching. But seriously, would you rather be woken up by a demon or some fucking 17-year-old with a gong who picks you up and throws you into a swimming pool? I'm going to go with the demon.
For sure, yeah.
It's probably get better conversation.
What did you think of the casting of this movie?
I really like the casting.
Same.
I think the casting of the girls is curious because none of them look even remotely related, other than they're all white. No familial, like no obvious lineage there whatsoever. It's interesting. Like, I know a couple of them have gone on to do quite big things. Joey King is in like everything currently. I want to say Shanley Caswell. She was in Detention. That's what we know her from.
Of course, yeah. Why have I not picked up on that before?
Yeah, I recognize. She was like one of the first that I recognized immediately. Is it Ron Livingston?
Yes.
Is the dad? Yeah, I think he's great, but I kept waiting for somebody to come along and ask him if he's got the TPS reports.
Oh no.
And so it just made me want to watch Office Space the whole time. I think of the family, my favourite was the mum because I adore Lily Taylor. I think she's friggin' adorable. I think she was perfectly cast in this. Towards the end, like quite a lot is asked of her physically as well.
Yeah,
I know,
for sure.
Obviously, at some points it's stunt people.
Of course.
And it, I will say that's one thing that works against this film for me. There are a couple of moments where it's like, that's not her, come on. Like, you know, it's a dude with a completely different build and a wig on.
That's a thing. It's the composer. He's twice in two of James Wan's films. His composer has stood in as one of the demons.
What?
Yeah. Can't remember his name.
The same dude.
Mm-hmm. He was called the Lipstick Demon in Insidious.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you who that exactly was. Whether that was the Darth Maul.
Isn't the Lipstick Demon Linnea Quigley in Night of the Demons?
Maybe. Joseph Bashara is his name.
What a dude. That would be the coolest job. Just like making some creepy plinky plonky music and then just being like, do you want to be a demon? Yeah, of course. Nice one. That's the best.
Yep.
But yeah, I think Lily Taylor did phenomenally well. Apparently she researched The Exorcist, which I think shows there are some definite similarities in like her mannerisms and Linda Blair while possessed. less crucifix masturbation.
Yep. Yeah,
Infinitely less crucifix masturbation. Yeah. I don't think any of us really need to see that again. or you know, the first time could have done without it. But there we go. Maybe that was once too many, Mr. Friedkin. But yeah, I think she did brilliantly. And she's not an actor you see much of anymore, which kind of makes me sad. She was like quite big in the late 80s and 90s, and she was in some of my favourite movies growing up. Like, she was just brilliant in Dogfight, and she was in Mary Harron's I Shot Andy Warhol, and I believe she was in the remake of The Haunting.
Oh, really?
Catherine Zeta-Jones steaming pile. Yeah. But she's got real range. So while it kind of makes me sad to see somebody I grew up watching playing like aging mother role, she just nailed it. She was brilliant.
For sure. Yeah, like there's some amazing moments in this film. One that jumps out is with Joey King when she's staring at the shadow behind the door. I think it goes to show both how well she can act, but also James Wan's skill as a director. Like, it's her staring at this shadow. Nothing is there. There is nothing to look at. Purely imagination and her acting skills that nail that moment so well, you know.
Yeah, and I just think in like the conception of it as well, because as a viewer you're sort of trained to go, whoa, there's something there. There must be something there. I can't see it. What? Maybe if I squint. And it forces you to give it your full attention. So it's very clever in that way. There's a few moments like that. Yeah, I was about
to say same thing. Like the one again jumps out is the just a perfectly held length of shot when the first time they use the music box. Because you sit there looking in the mirror, looking and waiting. And waiting, and they just hold that shot, and they're comfortable just sitting on that shot, and you're like, what's gonna happen, and of course there's the most minor of jump scares where the kid kind of makes her mum jump, but you know, it's about that tension. It's about holding that moment and letting the audience squirm, and he does that so well.
I think you're right actually, and he does sort of. He uses our expectations as a horror viewer against us.
Yeah.
In a way. And I think that's where it becomes obvious that he's clearly really invested in the genre. Like, you can kind of tell when people dip their toes in and maybe they do a genre film and then they fuck off back to doing like box office stuff.
Yeah.
But he's like, I know there was one moment where he kind of, it was years ago, when he sort of said he was like retiring from horror, and then he did like a Fast and the Furious movie and then came straight back. He was like, never again.
Not doing it.
Going back to this world. But yeah, I think the way that he can set these things up, and maybe like you always get your jump scare, but he's kind of a master of that.
Yeah. Yeah, he does. Because I don't think jump scares are one of those things that unskilled, or I don't think they're cheap. They can be. They can be very lazy, I would say. But in the hands of a competent director and director who knows what they're doing, I think they're just as much of a kind of a weapon in a horror director's arsenal as any other thing, you know.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's interesting you talk about the mirror shot. I mean, the toy itself is a really cool prop. But that's sort of, it's a trope that we're so familiar with. Like, every time a character in a horror film goes in a bathroom and they open the mirror door and they just, there's someone behind them. So it's using what we know, but just kind of maybe doing it a little beat longer. Yeah. So like to fuck with our expectations and the rhythm of what we know. It's not dissimilar to the thing that we see time and time again, but he does it just a little bit differently.
Yeah, and I think that as a horror fan, I really appreciate that, because it's so easy to go into a film and know exactly what's going to happen because of the way the music builds up or the way the kind of tension ramp, the gradient of the tension ramp, whatever. Like you can kind of guess what's going to happen. You can tell what's going to be fake out. You can tell what's going to be a legitimate scare. Just through watching and being invested in the genre. But as soon as you got someone who is also invested in the genre, like you say, they are able to subvert those things and kind of fuck with the audience's expectations. And I love it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he does it far better than most people. So to talk about the Conjuring universe as a whole, before we start thinking about maybe wrapping up, I don't know a whole heap about this, but I did read an article the other day that said basically the Conjuring universe is on the rails to become the biggest horror franchise of all time.
Really?
Which is kind of nuts. I mean, it's going to be the most prolific, isn't it?
Well, you've got Conjuring 1 and 2, now 3. You've got...
I'm going to stop you there because chronologically...
I was testing myself there. Okay, chronologically...
Fuck you, I wrote this down.
The Nun. Okay, The Nun.
Yeah.
You've got...
Go on.
Enfield Poltergeist.
No.
Oh, is it? No, it's Conjuring 1.
No.
No, okay. Curse of La Llorona.
No.
Okay, I give up. What am I forgetting?
So, The Nun, Annabelle Creation, Annabelle, The Conjuring, Annabelle Comes Home, The Curse of La Llorona, The Conjuring 2, The Conjuring 3, and they're going to be followed by, The Nun 2 and The Crooked Man of both. I don't know if they're in production yet, but they're certainly been greenlit.
I was not even close.
And I would be very shocked if there isn't a Conjuring 4.
I think interesting you should say that, because I think they are hamstringing themselves by making sure that they are all in reference to a case that the Warrens have used. I would actually prefer them to use them as a springboard and take them into a completely fictional plot. You know, going through their museum, I kind of had a Cabin in the Woods vibe, in the sense that you kind of like were curious.
You could pick up anything and fart out a story about it.
Exactly. And you'd be really curious about what went on with each. Like there's like a suit of like kind of Asian armor, or the symbol monkey, like that kind of monkey toy. You know, there's so many things in there that they could play with. And
What have we had the story of the monkey toy?
I know,
because those things are inherently creepy.
That was the one that made me think of that. Like, I want to see what that's about.
Me too.
You know, Toy Story 3.
Why is he holding those symbols so tightly? Why has he got that unwanted look in his eyes?
What has he seen?
What does he know? Yeah, that's a film I'd watch.
I think they're clearly very keen, and it might be the fact that the studio is trying to sort of keep control of it, but it seems like they're very keen on playing it safe. Like The Conjuring was new, but then they had
absolutely
The Conjuring 2, and they had Annabelle based on the first Conjuring movie, and then they had Annabelle 2 and 3 or whatever, and The Crooked Man based on The Conjuring 2, and The Nun based on, you know, like they're all sprawling out from each other, and there's nothing that just exists really in its own world.
But in my head, when I picture the Conjuring universe, it's that meme of Charlie from It's Always Sunny, cigarette in hand, other hand to his temple. Yeah, just like trying to figure out how everything intersects and connects. And like, it's too convoluted now. How many of them has James Wan actually had involvement with? Because I'm guessing that's kind of a shame that he doesn't have the rights to the wider universe.
Yeah, involvement, or did he direct? Is that which are you asking?
Either. Like maybe he produced some. I don't know.
I mean, I'm sure he produced most of them. He's a producer of The Nun 2, of The Crooked Man, of The Conjuring 3, of Annabelle Comes Home. Like, I'm sure he's a producer of all of them. As a director, he has done Conjuring 2 in The Conjuring, and that's it.
Okay. So he's sort of maintaining a role where he gets to oversee where the franchise goes,
But
I guess.
yeah, I mean, I almost think being a producer. I mean, I don't claim to know anything about the film industry. I almost think that gives you more power than the director.
I think it can, yeah.
Because
I think it
ultimately,
depends on the specific scenario, but yeah, I think because the producers are generally the ones who are sort of financing or securing financing, or I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I would agree, because you hear so many stories about like creative differences and directors being fired.
Yeah,
it's never the producers that drop out.
Yeah, for sure.
You know.
What was I watching the other day? There was I can't remember what it was. But there was a film in which the producers insisted on taking it another direction, and the film was worse off because of it. It's a shame that happens
a lot.
Oh, for sure.
It probably happens far more than we hear about. I actually read an article last week, and it was like 15 video game movies that never saw the light of day. And then I'm so sorry, that was my phone. How embarrassing. Don't edit that out. I don't care.
Oh no, I won't.
I'm popular. People message me. I've got friends. Yeah, and one of the films that never saw the light of day was a Halo adaptation that was going to be directed by Neil Blomkamp, and I
amazing,
nearly cried.
Yeah.
The fact that like now I know that was going to be a thing, but is also now never going to be a thing, is like, that's the closest I've come to heartbreak anytime recently. Oh, that would have been a good film. Good.
That would have been a very good film.
Can you imagine? Proper like mech sci-fi. Oh.
Well, it's like exactly his wheelhouse, really. I mean, with the right story, at least, I think.
And the right cast as well. I don't know. Maybe like Pedro Pascal could have been Master Chief, since he's got some experience at just being behind a helmet.
Worked for the Mandalorian.
Yeah, exactly. Dreamcast. Cool. Do you have anything else that you wish to talk about?
Do I have anything else? Yes. Minor thing. There is a song. Okay. There is a song that plays. So you know how I think they use. Is it it's the time of the season? I can't remember.
The zombies.
Yeah, like a lot of the music seems to be very set in the era that it's
of that era. Yeah.
But there's one song that is used a little later on in the film called something at the foot of your bed.
And it's really anachronistic.
Well, it kind of has a bit of a retro vibe, like it's using kind of like the whole the same sort of organ that you find in that sort of era, like the whatever rotary organ. But yeah, it seems a bit modern, kind of more modern produced. And I was looking it up, and it's a band called Dead Man's Bones. And Dead Man's Bones is a two-man band.
They sound like they sing sea shanties.
They do, don't they? Well, they apparently they got together because of their mutual love for the Haunted Mansion at Disney.
Really? Oh, that's adorable.
Like they just produce sort of like vaguely spooky music. But yeah, there's this one dude who I hadn't heard of. The other guy in Dead Man's Bones is none other than Mr. Ryan Gosling.
What?
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah, that song that pops up, I think it's when they're setting up the kit in the Conjuring, is
yeah, no, that's the song I'm thinking of, because that's the one I was just like, well, I don't know this one. Everything else is like recognisable and from the era, but I don't know this song. It's a little bit anachronistic, and it threw me. And you're telling me
Dead Man's Bones is a rock duo consisting of actor Ryan Gosling and his friend Zach Shields.
Fuck off. What? Are you having me on?
No, look it up. Look it up. It blew my mind. Like, because it does sound vaguely. It seems to be aping the sound from that era, but with like a modern twist.
But it's not. There was enough about it that wasn't 100% convincing that it stood out to me.
Yeah.
And you're telling me It was Mr. Ryan Gosling and friend.
It blew my mind.
I don't know what's weirder, that he has a side project where he makes music for James Wan films, or that he's like super into the Haunted Mansion.
Well, wasn't he a Disney child actor?
He was one of the House of Mouse kiddies. You're right. What was it?
Don't know. I've got
Some mousy child star fun time. I don't know if that sounded wrong. What was it called?
I don't know, but I love that name.
I don't know. They all seem to emerge from it really well adjusted, so I'm sure it's fine.
Is it the Mickey Mouse Club? Is that what you're thinking of?
Yes. Fuck's sake! You can't say it. They'll sue. We can't mention the mouse by name, Phil.
Michael Mouse.
We do not have, like, as much as I love our Patreons that keep us going, they will not fund legal fees. He didn't mean it. Edit that out. Anyway.
But no, do you want to start wrapping up?
Go on then. Okay. So I feel like most of what you've said has been overwhelmingly positive. Some of what I've said has been positive. So you're going to think I'm like a giant stick in the mud, but I'm going to give this a straight down the middle 5 out of 10.
Really?
Yes.
That average?
Yes. Don't make me second guess it.
That is exactly what I want you to do.
And I'm going to, no, do you know what? I'm going to justify it. I'm going to back up my thinking. I would say the 5 out of 10 is not based on how good the film is or how well constructed the film is or how good the separate elements are. Mm-hmm. It's based on enjoyment. Okay. I think the casting is great. I think the actors are great. I think Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga work really well together. I enjoyed all of the cast, actually. They were all brilliant. I think it looked great. I really like this kind of... like you said earlier, like the 70s throwback style and the filming techniques that he used to kind of recall that era.
And the use of wide-angle lenses was cool. Like really wide-angle lenses that make these rooms seem like they're just dwarfs or the characters within it, you know, make these rooms seem huge in comparison to the characters.
I think all of that was great. I think the script was fine. Mm-hmm. I would probably... This might sound mean. The script was fine. I would go as far as to say it was functional. It was not a standout. But I think where it really falls down is the story. And you're going to think I'm crazy for saying this, but I think the story is kind of boring.
Okay.
I think beyond the fact...
It's very standard, like, you know...
Just haunting, demon possession, demon people come and exorcise her or whatever. There's nothing special about the story. I think where it succeeds is, as you say, kind of James Wan using what he knows about horror to his advantage and to subvert what we expect to see. And I think largely he succeeds at that. But I don't know. I think the parts are greater than the sum.
That's
for
fair.
me, anyway.
No, that's fair.
So
like, it kind of points at something we've often talked about in that there's often a very horror and maybe sci-fi as well, one of the few kind of genres in which a film's actual quality can be so different to your enjoyment of it, and that makes it so difficult to actually rate that film, because a film can be kind of awful, but so much fun to watch.
But you could have the best time watching it.
How do you rate that? How do you approach that? You know, it's a weird one.
Yeah, and this was a second watch for me, and it didn't stand up as well the second time.
That's fair. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I mean, I think I don't necessarily disagree with anything you say, but I think maybe... But
you're wrong and I hate you.
Well, maybe it's the same thing that I feel about slashers, same way I feel about slashers.
Yeah.
In actually, I quite enjoy the familiarity of the story arc and the way it progresses. because it's familiar, you know. And I think
that makes sense.
It's perhaps why I like James Wan, because he does these films that aren't particularly different from any other film, but he just knows how to do them really, really well, and that's why I like him, because I like the familiarity of a horror movie that involves a ghost that haunts a house.
And I definitely do not disagree with you, but I think the reasons that you're saying you enjoy it are some of the reasons that I didn't enjoy it as much.
Yeah, oh for sure, yeah, like I said, it's the reason you like slashers and I don't. You know, the same kind of situation, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody's got their favourite sort of pocket of whatever genre they love, and if you find a film that fits that bill that is done particularly well, then it's exciting, and that's what this is for you, and I think that's rad. Yeah,
I mean, I think it helped, like, having seen the trailers, and because I remember watching the trailer, and
I remember the clapping kind of was a thing, wasn't it? And that was quite creepy.
Yeah, I think they ended the trailer on the shot of Carolyn with the match peering down down into the darkness and the hand coming. But the more I think about it, like, there's so many good moments in this film. Like that moment, the hand coming out of the wardrobe, I love that. Yeah. That kind of shadowy figure behind the door that I mentioned before. There are these really like standout moments that I think kind of will continue to exist in the kind of psyche of horror fans. And I think that's more that can be said for a lot of films of that genre, where they're just completely forgettable entirely, you know? So, I mean, like I would give it like a maybe a 7 or an 8, you know?
Yeah, I expected that, to be honest.
It's way up there for me, but it's my sort of film, you know? It's the type of horror that I tend to enjoy.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. There are some very memorable moments and some very well done moments. But for me, I think the hokier moments kind of undermined the better stuff. But yeah.
Cool.
I think that's fine. I knew you would give it. I would have predicted an 8.
I can't remember what I put on Letterboxd, maybe even higher.
Did you?
Yeah, I can't remember what it was.
10 out of 10, only rivaled by Scott Pilgrim.
And Cabin in the Woods. Come on. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5, so it was effectively a 9 out of 10.
So a 9, yeah. Okay.
Maybe I was a bit generous. It was a rewatch, and
you can give it a 9.
No,
that's fine.
I'm second guessing.
And between us, the Radio Gorepress overall score is a 7. That seems fair.
That is fair.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you chose that, actually, because we have we ever really done an old-fashioned kind of haunted house movie? I'm not sure we have.
If we have, it's been a long time, you know.
Yeah. It was an interesting one. It was different. It's not something I necessarily would have chosen, but I'm glad you
We have got a couple more in the works that might be more along those lines, so stay tuned for them. Not going to say what they are, just in case they change, but...
This is the first year we've actually been this organised enough to know what we're doing months ahead.
We have a plan, guys. This is
we do. Oh my
unprecedented.
We'll see. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. It might not last.
No.
Give it a fortnight, we'll have fallen to bits and we'll just be picking things off the shelf again. Basket case 2, anyone? No? All right, I'll keep it to myself. So on that note, I think now is as good a time as any to wrap up. I really enjoyed that. I hope you did too. I would say I'm very looking forward to next time, but I'm not. It's a film I do not want to watch. And I think the same goes for Phil and Rosie.
I think we should change it.
Who will be... I don't know. It will be interesting. It'll be interesting. Yes, we're hoping to have Rosie back in 2 weeks' time. And thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting. The best possible thing you can do if you enjoyed the show is to like, share, leave a review on your podcast platform of choice. Maybe follow us on social media, come and chat, suggest films even. And if you're feeling especially generous, we've got a Patreon and a Ko-fi, both of which will be linked in the podcast blurb. So until next time, take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll catch you next time. Stay spooky.
Bye-bye.